Welcome to this comprehensive journey through the history of Missouri, the Show Me State. Located at the heart of America, Missouri has been a crossroads of cultures, a gateway to the West, and a state that has profoundly shaped the American story. From ancient Native American civilizations to French explorers, from the Louisiana Purchase to the Civil War, from the birth of jazz to the Gateway Arch, Missouri's history is as rich and diverse as the mighty rivers that define its borders. Today, we'll explore how this land transformed from the prehistoric settlements along the Mississippi and Missouri rivers into one of America's most historically significant states. We'll uncover stories of triumph and tragedy, innovation and tradition, conflict and unity. So settle in as we embark on this epic journey through time, discovering how Missouri earned its nickname and why its history matters to understanding America itself. Chapter 1: The First Missourians. Pre-colonial era. Long before European explorers set foot on this land, Missouri was home to sophisticated Native American civilizations. The story begins over 12,000 years ago when Paleo-Indians first arrived, following mammoths and other megafauna across the landscape. These early hunters left behind distinctive Clovis points, finely crafted spearheads that archaeologists still discover today. But the most remarkable chapter of pre-colonial Missouri belongs to the Mississippian culture, which flourished between 900 and 1400 CE. At Cahokia, just across the Mississippi River from present-day St. Louis, these ancient peoples built the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico. At its peak, around 1050 CE, Cahokia housed perhaps 20,000 people, larger than London at the same time. The city featured over 120 earthen mounds, with Monks Mound standing 100 feet tall and covering 14 acres at its base, making it the largest prehistoric earthwork in the Americas. The Mississippians were master farmers, growing corn, beans, and squash in the fertile river bottoms. They established vast trade networks, bringing in copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and mica from the Appalachians. Their society was highly organized, with clear social hierarchies, specialized craftsmen, and religious leaders who tracked celestial events using wooden henges, America's own Stonehenge. Around 1400, Cahokia mysteriously declined. Climate change, resource depletion, and social upheaval may have contributed to its abandonment. By the time Europeans arrived, the great city was already a ghost town, its massive mounds covered in grass and trees. The void left by the Mississippians was filled by various tribal groups. The Osage Nation dominated much of Missouri, particularly the western regions. Known as the Children of the Middle Waters, the Osage were formidable warriors and skilled buffalo hunters who controlled territory from Missouri to Arkansas and Oklahoma. In the eastern regions, the Illinois Confederacy held sway, while the Missouri tribe, for whom the state would eventually be named, lived along the river that bears their name. These tribes had complex societies with sophisticated governmental structures, religious beliefs, and cultural practices. The Osage, for instance, divided their society into sky people and earth people, maintaining balance through complementary roles. They lived in semi-permanent villages, practicing agriculture while also following seasonal hunting patterns. Chapter 2: European Exploration and French Colonial Period. The European chapter of Missouri's story began in 1673 when French explorers Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet became the first Europeans to see the mouth of the Missouri River. paddling down the Mississippi, they noted the powerful tributary that Native Americans called Pekitanui, the river of the muddy waters. Marquette wrote in his journal about the Missouri's tremendous force, describing how it rushed into the Mississippi with such impetuosity that we could not, without great danger, risk passing through it. 9 years later, in 1682, René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de la Salle, claimed the entire Mississippi River basin for France, naming it Louisiana in honor of King Louis XIV. This vast territory, stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico and from the Appalachians to the Rocky Mountains, included all of present-day Missouri. The French approach to colonization differed markedly from the Spanish and English. Rather than conquering and displacing native populations, the French generally sought partnerships, especially in the lucrative fur trade. French coureurs de bois, literally runners of the woods, lived among native tribes, learned their languages, and often married native women. This created a unique cultural blend that would influence Missouri for generations. The first permanent European settlement in Missouri was Sainte Geneviève, established around 1735 on the west bank of the Mississippi. French settlers, including many from the Illinois country, were attracted by the rich agricultural land and lead deposits in the area. These early colonists brought enslaved Africans to work in agriculture and mining, establishing slavery in Missouri from its earliest European settlement. In 1764, Pierre Laclede and his stepson Auguste Chouteau founded St. Louis as a fur trading post. Laclede chose the site carefully, on high ground safe from flooding, near the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. He envisioned St. Louis becoming one of the finest cities in America, a prediction that would prove remarkably accurate. The Chouteau family would become Missouri's first dynasty, dominating the fur trade and accumulating vast wealth and political power. The French brought more than commerce to Missouri. They introduced Catholicism, establishing missions and churches. They brought French legal traditions, including community property rights that gave women more economic power than under English common law. They introduced French architecture, with its distinctive galleries and steep-roofed houses adapted to the Mississippi Valley climate. Many Missouri towns still bear French names: Florissant, Gravois, Crèvecoeur, and Desperes. But France's hold on Louisiana was tenuous. The expenses of the 7 Years' War, 1756-1763, drained the French treasury. In a secret treaty in 1762, France transferred Louisiana to Spain rather than let it fall to the British. For the next 38 years, Missouri would be under Spanish rule, though French culture and language continued to dominate. Chapter 3: Spanish Rule and the Opening of the West. Spanish rule over Missouri, lasting from 1762 to 1800, brought significant changes despite the continued French cultural influence. The Spanish governors, ruling from New Orleans, had ambitious plans to develop Upper Louisiana as a buffer against British and later American expansion. The Spanish implemented a more liberal immigration policy than the French, welcoming settlers regardless of nationality, as long as they pledged allegiance to Spain and nominally converted to Catholicism. This policy would have profound consequences as American pioneers began trickling across the Mississippi, drawn by free land grants and no taxes. Moses Austin received permission to bring American families to Missouri in 1797, establishing Potosi as a lead mining center. His son Stephen would later use similar tactics to settle Texas. One of the most significant figures of the Spanish period was Manuel Lisa, a Spanish citizen of Italian descent who revolutionized the Missouri River fur trade. In 1807, Lisa established Fort Raymond at the mouth of the Bighorn River in present-day Montana, pioneering the upper Missouri River trade route that would define Missouri's economy for decades. Lisa's Missouri Fur Company competed fiercely with John Jacob Astor's American Fur Company, establishing a network of trading posts that extended American influence deep into the continent. The Spanish period saw St. Louis grow from a small trading post to a thriving town of nearly 1,000 people. The Spanish built fortifications, established governmental structures, and continued the practice of slavery, while also recognizing free people of color, a more nuanced racial system than would exist under American rule. Under Spanish rule, Missouri became increasingly connected to the wider world. The Mississippi River trade route linked Missouri to New Orleans and global markets. Lead from Missouri mines supplied ammunition for the American Revolution. St. Louis merchants traded with Santa Fe, establishing routes that would later become the Santa Fe Trail. In 1800, Spain secretly returned Louisiana to France under pressure from Napoleon Bonaparte, who had dreams of a French empire in North America. However, these plans crumbled in the face of military setbacks in Haiti and the looming threat of war with Britain. Napoleon, needing funds for his European campaigns, made a decision that would transform Missouri and America forever. Chapter 4: The Louisiana Purchase and American Territorial Period. On April 30th, 1803, American negotiators in Paris concluded perhaps the greatest real estate deal in history. For $15 million, about 4 cents per acre, the United States purchased 828,000 square miles of territory from France, doubling the nation's size overnight. The Louisiana Purchase included all of present-day Missouri, and St. Louis would serve as the gateway to this vast new frontier. President Thomas Jefferson immediately organized expeditions to explore and document the purchase. The most famous, the Corps of Discovery, led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, departed from St. Charles, Missouri on May 21st, 1804. Their journey up the Missouri River and on to the Pacific Ocean began Missouri's role as the jumping-off point for Western exploration and expansion. The Lewis and Clark expedition spent more time in Missouri than any other future state, carefully documenting the river systems, native tribes, flora, and fauna. They wintered near present-day St. Louis, preparing for their journey, and their successful return in 1806 sparked nationwide excitement about the West's potential. The transition to American rule wasn't entirely smooth. French and Spanish residents worried about their property rights and cultural traditions. The American legal system, based on English common law, differed significantly from the civil law traditions they knew. Many French families, who had received land grants from Spanish governors, now had to prove their claims to skeptical American officials. In 1804, the District of Louisiana was organized, with St. Louis as its capital. In 1805, it became the Territory of Louisiana, and in 1812, to avoid confusion with the new state of Louisiana, it was renamed the Missouri Territory. The territorial period saw rapid transformation as American settlers poured in, drawn by cheap land and economic opportunity. The territorial government, appointed by the president, struggled to balance competing interests. French Creole elites sought to maintain their influence. American settlers demanded democratic institutions and access to land, Native American tribes fought to preserve their territories, and enslaved African Americans, whose numbers grew rapidly with American immigration, had no voice at all in these deliberations. Missouri's population exploded during the territorial period, from about 20,000 in 1804 to over 66,000 by 1820. New towns sprang up along the rivers: Franklin, Boonville, and Independence. The economy diversified beyond fur trading to include lead mining, agriculture, and commerce. St. Louis emerged as a major commercial hub, its waterfront crowded with steamboats, flatboats, and keelboats carrying goods and people throughout the Mississippi Valley. The War of 1812 brought challenges and opportunities to Missouri. Native American tribes, allied with the British, attacked frontier settlements. The Battle of the Sinkhole in 1815 near present-day Old Monroe was one of the last conflicts of the war. But the war also eliminated British influence in the region and accelerated westward migration as veterans received land grants for their service. Chapter 5: The Missouri Compromise and Statehood. By 1818, Missouri's population exceeded 60,000, meeting the requirement for statehood. What should have been a routine admission process instead triggered the first great crisis over slavery that would ultimately lead to the Civil War. When Missouri applied for statehood as a slave state, it threatened to upset the delicate balance in the U.S. Senate between free and slave states. The debate that erupted in Congress in 1819 shocked the nation with its intensity. Representative James Tallmadge of New York proposed amendments that would gradually eliminate slavery in Missouri. No more slaves could be brought in, and children of enslaved people would be freed at age 25. The proposal passed the House, but failed in the Senate, creating a dangerous deadlock. Thomas Jefferson, retired at Monticello, described the crisis as a fire bell in the night that filled him with terror. The debate wasn't just about Missouri, it was about the future of slavery in America and the balance of power between North and South. For over a year, Congress remained gridlocked while Missouri waited in limbo. The solution came from Henry Clay, the great compromiser. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 admitted Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state, maintaining the Senate balance. More significantly, it prohibited slavery in the Louisiana Purchase territory, north of the 36°30 parallel, Missouri's southern border, except within Missouri itself. But even after this compromise, Missouri's path to statehood faced another obstacle. The state's proposed constitution prohibited free blacks from entering Missouri, violating the U.S. Constitution's guarantee that citizens of each state enjoy the privileges of citizens in all states. This triggered another crisis, resolved only when Missouri's legislature agreed never to interpret this clause in a way that violated the U.S. Constitution, a meaningless promise that nonetheless allowed everyone to save face. On August the 10th, 1821, Missouri officially became the 24th state. The struggle over its admission had revealed the deep divisions that would eventually tear the nation apart. Missouri entered the Union as a slave state, but one surrounded on three sides by free territory, a geographic reality that would profoundly influence its development and its experience in the coming Civil War. Chapter 6: Frontier, Missouri, and Westward Expansion. With statehood achieved, Missouri rapidly transformed into America's gateway to the West. The state's position at the confluence of major rivers and at the edge of the frontier made it the natural launching point for Western migration and commerce. Three great trails began in Missouri, carrying hundreds of thousands of Americans to their destinies in the West. The Santa Fe Trail, pioneered by William Becknell in 1821, began in Franklin, Missouri. Later Independence became the primary departure point. This 900-mile trade route to New Mexico opened lucrative markets for Missouri merchants. Traders loaded massive freight wagons with manufactured goods and headed southwest, returning with silver, furs, and mules. The trail generated enormous wealth for Missouri businesses and established the state's commercial ties to the Southwest that persist today. The Oregon Trail, which began in Independence in the 1840s, carried over 400,000 settlers to the Pacific Northwest. Every spring, Independence and St. Joseph bustled with activity as wagon trains assembled for the 2,000-mile journey. Outfitters made fortunes selling supplies, guides, and equipment. The phrase manifest destiny might have been coined elsewhere, but it was from Missouri that Americans actually manifested their continental ambitions. The California Gold Rush of 1849 intensified Missouri's role as the jumping-off point. St. Joseph became the eastern terminus of the Pony Express in 1860, connecting California to the rest of the nation in just 10 days. Though the Pony Express operated for only 18 months before the transcontinental telegraph made it obsolete, it became an enduring symbol of American enterprise and Missouri's central role in connecting East and West. This period also saw the transformation of St. Louis into one of America's great cities. The introduction of steamboats in the 1810s revolutionized river commerce. By the 1850s, St. Louis's levee was one of the busiest ports in the nation, with dozens of steamboats arriving daily. The city's population exploded from 16,000 in 1840 to 160,000 by 1860, making it the eighth largest city in America. German and Irish immigrants flooded into Missouri during this period, profoundly shaping the state's culture. Germans, many fleeing political upheaval after the failed revolutions of 1848, settled heavily in St. Louis and along the Missouri River. They brought brewing expertise. Anheuser-Busch was founded in 1852. Musical traditions and progressive political ideas, including strong opposition to slavery. Irish immigrants, escaping the potato famine, provided labor for growing industries and infrastructure projects. The frontier character of Missouri during this period was both romantic and violent. The state struggled with lawlessness, particularly in the western counties. Bushwhackers, border ruffians, and various outlaw gangs operated with impunity. This was the Missouri that shaped Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, who grew up in Hannibal, watching the river traffic and absorbing the stories that would later make him America's most celebrated author. Chapter 7: Bleeding Kansas and the Road to Civil War. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 shattered the Missouri Compromise and plunged Missouri into a violent prelude to the Civil War. The act allowed settlers in Kansas Territory to decide the slavery question through popular sovereignty. For Missouri, this meant potential chaos on its western border, as the fate of slavery in Kansas would directly impact Missouri's peculiar institution. Pro-slavery Missourians, called border ruffians, flooded into Kansas during elections, fraudulently voting to establish a pro-slavery government. Senator David Rice Atchison of Missouri openly encouraged this interference, declaring, "We will be compelled to shoot, burn, and hang, but the thing will soon be over." Anti-slavery settlers, many sponsored by New England immigrant aid societies, fought back. The resulting guerrilla warfare earned the territory the name Bleeding Kansas. The violence spilled back into Missouri. Abolitionists like John Brown raided Missouri farms, liberating enslaved people and killing slaveholders. Missouri raiders retaliated by attacking free state settlements in Kansas. The town of Lawrence, Kansas, was sacked multiple times. This border war created a culture of violence and vigilantism that would explode during the Civil War proper. The Dred Scott decision of 1857 further inflamed tensions. Scott, an enslaved man from Missouri, sued for his freedom based on having lived in free territory. The Supreme Court not only denied his claim, but declared that African Americans could never be citizens and that Congress had no power to prohibit slavery in the territories. The decision, while a victory for Missouri slaveholders, outraged the North and pushed the nation closer to war. By 1860, Missouri found itself in an impossible position. With only 115,000 enslaved people out of a population of 1.2 million, slavery was less central to Missouri's economy than in the Deep South. St. Louis, with its large German immigrant population, was decidedly anti-slavery. But rural areas, especially along the Missouri River, in the Little Dixie region, strongly supported the institution. When Abraham Lincoln won the presidency in 1860 without winning a single slave state, secession fever swept the South. Missouri's governor, Claiborne Fox Jackson, supported secession, but he faced strong opposition. A special convention, called to consider secession, instead declared neutrality. Missouri would try to stay out of the coming war, an impossible dream for a border state at the crossroads of America. Chapter 8. The Civil War in Missouri. No state suffered more during the Civil War than Missouri. While not experiencing massive conventional battles like Gettysburg or Antietam, Missouri endured a savage guerrilla war that killed proportionally more civilians than any other state. Neighbor fought neighbor, families split apart, and entire counties were depopulated. The war began dramatically in Missouri. In May 1861, Union Captain Nathaniel Lyon seized the arsenal in St. Louis, preventing its weapons from falling into Confederate hands. When he marched, captured Confederate militia through St. Louis streets, pro-Southern civilians rioted, resulting in 28 deaths. This Camp Jackson affair pushed many previously neutral Missourians toward the Confederacy. Governor Jackson and the pro-Confederate legislature fled to the southwestern corner of the state, where they declared secession. But the Union controlled most of Missouri, including St. Louis and the Missouri River. The Battle of Wilson's Creek in August 1861, where Lyon was killed, was a Confederate victory, but failed to give the South control of Missouri. For the rest of the war, Missouri had two competing governments, one Union, one Confederate, though the Union government held actual control. The conventional war in Missouri largely ended by 1862, but the guerrilla war intensified. Confederate guerrillas, or bushwhackers, operated throughout the state. Leaders like William Quantrill, Bloody Bill Anderson, and the James brothers, Frank and Jesse, waged brutal irregular warfare. They attacked Union patrols, destroyed railroads, murdered Union sympathizers, and terrorized entire communities. The Union response was equally harsh. General Order No. 11, issued in 1863, forcibly evacuated 4 counties on the Kansas border. burning homes and crops to deny support to guerrillas. Union militia, including Kansas Jayhawkers seeking revenge for earlier border ruffian attacks, conducted retaliatory raids that killed civilians and destroyed property. Quantrill's raid on Lawrence, Kansas, in August 1863, epitomized the war's savagery. His men killed over 180 men and boys, burning much of the town. Such atrocities prompted even harsher Union measures, creating a cycle of violence that continued even after the war officially ended. The Battle of Westport in October 1864, sometimes called the Gettysburg of the West, was the largest Civil War battle west of the Mississippi. Confederate General Sterling Price's invasion of Missouri was defeated, ending the last major Confederate offensive in the Trans-Mississippi Theater. Missouri provided 109,000 Union soldiers and 30,000 Confederate soldiers, more troops for the Union than any other slave state. This included 8,300 African American soldiers, many formerly enslaved, who fought courageously for their freedom. The 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry Regiment, largely recruited from Missouri refugees, was the first African American unit to see combat in the Civil War. Missouri also produced notable military leaders. Ulysses S. Grant began his Civil War career in Missouri. Sterling Price became one of the Confederacy's most prominent trans-Mississippi generals, and the war created folk heroes and outlaws whose legends would long outlive them, most notably Jesse James, who used skills learned as a bushwhacker to become America's most famous outlaw. Chapter 9: Reconstruction and the Gilded Age. Missouri's Reconstruction differed dramatically from the Deep South's experience. Having never officially left the Union, Missouri avoided military occupation. But the state faced enormous challenges: a devastated countryside, bitter political divisions, and the difficult transition from slavery to freedom. The radical Republicans who controlled Missouri's government immediately abolished slavery in January 1865. Before the 13th Amendment, they enacted a new constitution requiring loyalty oaths that disenfranchised anyone who had supported the Confederacy, even sympathizers. This eliminated roughly 1/3 of Missouri's white male population from voting or holding office, practicing law, or even preaching in churches. This draconian approach backfired. In 1870, liberal Republicans, allied with Democrats, swept the radicals from power and reversed most Reconstruction measures. Unlike in the Deep South, African Americans in Missouri never gained significant political power during Reconstruction. While they gained freedom and basic civil rights, true equality remained elusive. The post-war period saw Missouri transform from a frontier state into an industrial powerhouse. St. Louis, already a commercial hub, became a manufacturing center. The city hosted the 1904 World's Fair, showcasing Missouri's progress to the world. Kansas City, devastated during the war, rebuilt rapidly, becoming a major railroad hub and cattle market. The railroad boom transformed Missouri. Between 1850 and 1870, railroad mileage increased to over 2,000 miles. The Eads Bridge, completed in 1874, was an engineering marvel. The first bridge to span the Mississippi at St. Louis. Its steel arch design and pneumatic caisson construction technique revolutionized bridge building worldwide. This period also saw the rise of Missouri's most famous author, Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens drew on his Missouri childhood to create enduring American literature. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, 1876, and Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, 1884, captured antebellum Missouri while addressing profound themes of race, freedom, and American identity. Twain's humor and social criticism made him America's most celebrated writer. The Gilded Age brought both progress and problems. Industrial growth created wealth, but also labor strife. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 saw violent confrontations in St. Louis. Political corruption flourished, with both parties engaging in vote buying and fraud. The James Gang and other outlaws, glorified as Robin Hood figures resisting Northern oppression, actually represented the lawlessness plaguing rural Missouri. Agriculture evolved as well. Missouri became a leading producer of corn, wheat, and livestock. The invention of barbed wire transformed the open range into enclosed farms. German immigrants established Missouri's wine industry, creating thriving vineyards until Prohibition destroyed them decades later. Chapter 10: Progressive Era and Early 20th Century. The dawn of the 20th century found Missouri at the height of its national influence. St. Louis, with 575,000 residents, was America's fourth largest city. The state's central location, diverse economy, and political importance made it a bellwether for national trends. The 1904 World's Fair, officially the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, announced Missouri's arrival as a modern, progressive state. The fair was a spectacular success, attracting 20 million visitors to Forest Park. It introduced America to ice cream cones, iced tea, and cotton candy. The fair showcased technological marvels like wireless communication, electric lights, and automobiles. It also, troublingly, featured human exhibitions that reflected the era's racist attitudes, including Filipino villages and African pygmies displayed as curiosities. Missouri embraced progressive era reforms, though not without controversy. Governor Joseph Folk, 1905-1909, fought political corruption, earning national attention. The state adopted initiative and referendum procedures, giving citizens direct voice in lawmaking. Women's suffrage gained momentum, though Missouri women wouldn't vote until the 19th Amendment in 1920. Kansas City emerged as a jazz capital during this period. The city's permissive atmosphere during Prohibition, Tom Pendergast's political machine, openly tolerated speakeasies, attracted musicians from across America. The 18th and Vine District became a legendary jazz center, nurturing talents like Count Basie, Charlie Parker, and Mary Lou Williams. Kansas City jazz, with its emphasis on blues and improvisation, profoundly influenced American music. The Pendergast machine in Kansas City exemplified both the corruption and effectiveness of urban political machines. Tom Pendergast controlled Kansas City politics from 1925 to 1939, delivering services to constituents while enriching himself through graft. His machine launched Harry Truman's political career, though Truman himself remained personally honest. World War I transformed Missouri's economy. The state's farms fed Allied armies. St. Louis factories produced ammunition, chemicals, and aircraft. Lambeau Field became a military aviation center. Over 140,000 Missourians served in the military, with over 11,000 casualties. The war accelerated urbanization and industrialization while beginning the Great Migration of African Americans from the rural South to northern cities, including St. Louis and Kansas City. The 1920s brought prosperity, but also challenges. Agriculture suffered as wartime demand collapsed, beginning a farm crisis that would last until World War II. The Ku Klux Klan resurged, though it never dominated Missouri politics as it did in neighboring states. Prohibition proved largely unenforceable, especially in the cities, fostering corruption and organized crime. Chapter 11: Depression, New Deal, and World War II. The Great Depression hit Missouri hard. Farm prices, already depressed, collapsed entirely. By 1933, corn sold for less than the cost of production. Thousands of farms faced foreclosure. The Dust Bowl didn't center on Missouri, but drought devastated the state's agriculture. Rural counties lost population as families fled to cities or headed west. Urban areas suffered too. St. Louis unemployment reached 30%. Banks failed across the state. The Depression exposed the stark inequalities in Missouri society. African Americans, already marginalized, faced even worse conditions. In rural areas, sharecropping systems collapsed, leaving thousands destitute. Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal brought relief. The Civilian Conservation Corps employed thousands of young Missourians, building parks and infrastructure that still serve the state. The Works Progress Administration constructed schools, roads, and public buildings. Lake of the Ozarks, created by the Bagnell Dam, completed in 1931, became a symbol of progress, providing electricity and recreation while displacing entire communities. Missouri produced one of the New Deal's most important figures, Harry S. Truman. As Senator, 1935-1945, Truman gained national prominence, heading a committee investigating defense contractor fraud, saving billions in military spending. His reputation for honesty and efficiency made him Roosevelt's choice for vice president in 1944. World War II ended the Depression and transformed Missouri. St. Louis became the nation's second largest aircraft production center. The Curtiss Wright plant employed 50,000 workers, including thousands of women, Rosie the Riveters. Kansas City's Pratt and Whitney plant built engines for half of America's military aircraft. Fort Leonard Wood, established in 1940, trained hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The war brought social change. African Americans and women entered industrial jobs previously denied them. German and Italian prisoners of war worked on Missouri farms, sometimes developing lasting connections with local communities. The war's demands broke down some social barriers, though full equality remained distant. On April 12, 1945, Harry Truman became president upon Roosevelt's death. The Missouri haberdasher faced immense challenges, ending the war, managing the atomic age he initiated with the bombing of Japan, and navigating the emerging Cold War. Truman's plain-spoken Missouri style, "the buck stops here," resonated with Americans and defined presidential leadership. Chapter 12: Post-War Missouri and Civil Rights. Post-war Missouri experienced dramatic changes. Returning veterans used GI Bill benefits to buy homes and attend college, fueling suburban growth. St. Louis and Kansas City expanded rapidly, though this growth came at a cost. White flight to suburbs left urban cores increasingly African American and increasingly poor. Urban renewal projects, supposedly designed to eliminate slums, often destroyed viable African American communities. The interstate highway system, beginning in 1956, transformed Missouri. Interstate 70, following the old National Road, connected Kansas City and St. Louis. Interstate 44 replaced Route 66, the Mother Road, that had carried Dust Bowl refugees and post-war vacationers through Missouri. While interstates brought economic benefits, They also divided communities and accelerated suburban sprawl. Missouri played a crucial role in the civil rights movement. The state's segregation was complex, not mandated by state law like the Deep South, but widespread through local ordinances and custom. St. Louis and Kansas City maintained segregated schools, restaurants, hotels, and neighborhoods. Rural areas often excluded African Americans entirely. The fight for integration began early in Missouri. In 1936, Lloyd Gaines sued for admission to the University of Missouri Law School. The Supreme Court ruled Missouri must provide equal education for African Americans, though Gaines mysteriously disappeared before entering the school. This case laid groundwork for Brown v. Board of Education. Missouri civil rights activists achieved significant victories. In 1947, St. Louis integrated its public swimming pools after protests. The Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, conducted successful sit-ins at St. Louis lunch counters in 1949, years before the more famous Southern sit-ins. Kansas City integrated its public accommodations relatively peacefully in the early 1960s, but progress was uneven and often violent. St. Louis schools didn't fully integrate until the 1980s under court order. Housing discrimination persisted despite fair housing laws. The 1968 assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. sparked riots in Kansas City, revealing deep racial tensions. Economic inequality between black and white Missourians remained stark. The Vietnam War divided Missouri like the nation. Anti-war protests erupted at universities. The 1970 protests at the University of Missouri led to the first use of National Guard troops on campus. Meanwhile, rural Missouri strongly supported the war effort. This cultural divide between urban and rural, liberal and conservative, would increasingly define Missouri politics. Chapter 13: Modern Missouri, Economic Transformation. The late 20th century brought painful economic transitions. Manufacturing, once Missouri's strength, declined precipitously. St. Louis lost major corporations, including Anheuser-Busch's independence in 2008. The city's population fell from 850,000 in 1950 to under 320,000 by 2000. Kansas City fared better, but still struggled with urban decay and suburban sprawl. Agriculture consolidated dramatically. Family farms, once Missouri's backbone, gave way to industrial operations. The number of farms dropped from 200,000 in 1950 to 100,000 by 2000. Though production increased through mechanization and scientific farming, Missouri remained a leading agricultural state. But rural communities hollowed out as farming required fewer workers. New economies emerged. Tourism became crucial, with Branson emerging as a country music capital, rivaling Nashville. The Lake of the Ozarks attracted millions of visitors annually. Missouri wine country, rebuilt after Prohibition, gained international recognition. Casinos, legalized in 1992, generated revenue, but also social problems. Technology and healthcare became economic drivers. St. Louis developed a significant biotech sector, building on Monsanto's agricultural technology and Washington University's medical research. Cerner Corporation made Kansas City a health information technology hub. Missouri's central location and low costs attracted data centers and logistics operations. Education became increasingly important and contentious. Missouri's universities, Washington University, the University of Missouri System, and St. Louis University gained prominence in research. But funding for education, especially K-12, remained problematic. The state's school funding formula faced repeated legal challenges for inequitably serving poor districts. Chapter 14: Contemporary Challenges and Culture. 21st century Missouri faces complex challenges. The Ferguson unrest of 2014, following Michael Brown's shooting, exposed deep racial divisions and policing problems. The protests sparked a national conversation about race, justice, and inequality. Ferguson revealed that despite progress, Missouri hadn't resolved its racial tensions rooted in centuries of discrimination. Missouri's political landscape shifted dramatically. Once a bellwether state that voted for the presidential winner in every election from 1904 to 2004, except 1956, Missouri became solidly Republican in federal elections while maintaining competitive state races. This reflected broader urban-rural divides, with diverse cities voting Democratic, while rural areas overwhelmingly supported Republicans. The opioid crisis devastated Missouri communities. Rural areas, already struggling economically, faced epidemic levels of addiction. Methamphetamine production plagued the state. Missouri led the nation in meth lab seizures for years. These drug problems strained social services, law enforcement, and families across the state. Climate change brought new challenges. Increased flooding threatened river communities. The Great Flood of 1993 caused billions in damage, and floods became more frequent. Extreme weather events, from tornadoes to ice storms, intensified. Agriculture faced uncertain growing conditions. Missouri found itself on the front lines of climate adaptation. Yet Missouri culture remained vibrant. The state produced influential artists, from filmmaker Robert Altman to poet Maya Angelou, who spent formative years in St. Louis. Missouri's musical heritage, from ragtime and jazz to country and hip-hop, continued evolving. Nelly put St. Louis hip-hop on the map. Tech N9 built a Kansas City-based independent music empire. Sports unified Missourians across divisions. The St. Louis Cardinals' 11 World Series championships made them one of baseball's most successful franchises. The Kansas City Chiefs' recent success, including Super Bowl victories, energized fans. The Blues' 2019 Stanley Cup victory ended St. Louis's 52-year championship drought. College sports, especially Mizzou football and basketball, inspired fierce loyalty. Chapter 15: Missouri Today and Looking Forward. Today's Missouri embodies both its historical legacy and contemporary dynamism. With 6.2 million residents, Missouri remains America's geographic and cultural crossroads. The state's economy, while challenged, shows resilience and adaptation. St. Louis and Kansas City anchor growing metropolitan areas, even as rural regions struggle with population loss. Innovation offers hope. St. Louis's Cortex Innovation Community represents new economic thinking, fostering startups and research. Kansas City's gigabit fiber network made it a smart city pioneer. Missouri's universities conduct cutting-edge research in medicine, agriculture, and technology. The state's central location positions it well for logistics and distribution in an e-commerce age. Missouri's cultural contributions continue. The state's barbecue traditions, Kansas City's sweet sauces, and St. Louis's grilled pork steaks achieve cult status nationwide. Missouri wine grows in reputation. The state's conservation efforts, funded by a dedicated sales tax voters, repeatedly approve, make Missouri a national leader in protecting natural resources. Challenges persist. Infrastructure needs massive investment. Many bridges and roads date to the interstate boom and require replacement. Healthcare access remains problematic in rural areas as hospitals close. Education funding struggles continue. The urban-rural divide seems to widen, with different regions experiencing different economies and cultures. Political dysfunction hampers progress. Missouri's legislature often seems more interested in cultural warfare than solving practical problems. Medicaid expansion, approved by voters in 2020, faced legislative resistance. Local control versus state mandates creates constant tension, especially regarding Kansas City and St. Louis attempts to address their unique challenges. Yet Missouri's greatest strength remains its people's resilience. From Native Americans adapting to European colonization to pioneers heading west, from enslaved people claiming freedom to immigrants building new lives, Missourians have always shown remarkable adaptability. This show me skepticism, combined with practical problem solving, defines Missouri character. Conclusion: the show me state's enduring legacy. Missouri's history is America's history in microcosm. Every great American theme, exploration and settlement, slavery and freedom, agriculture and industrialization, rural and urban, played out in Missouri. The state's geographic centrality made it literally and figuratively the crossroads where American destinies were determined. From Cahokia's ancient mounds to the Gateway Arch's modern steel, Missouri has always looked both backward and forward. The state that gave America Mark Twain's nostalgic childhood and Harry Truman's plain-speaking leadership embodies both tradition and change. Missouri's struggles with race, from Dred Scott to Ferguson, reflect America's ongoing challenge to fulfill its democratic promises. Missouri's economic transformations, from fur trading to farming to manufacturing to services, mirror national trends. The state's political evolution, from bellwether to partisan, reflects American polarization. Missouri's cultural contributions, from jazz to journalism, helped define American identity. Understanding Missouri's history helps understand America itself. The compromises that allowed Missouri statehood delayed but couldn't prevent civil war. The railroads that made Kansas City and St. Louis great cities also enabled Western expansion. The same Mississippi River that brought commerce also brought catastrophic floods. Missouri's story is one of triumph and tragedy, progress and setback, unity and division. Looking forward, Missouri faces uncertain but not unprecedented challenges. Climate change, economic disruption, and social division seem daunting. But Missourians have faced existential challenges before: civil war, economic collapse, social transformation, and survived. The same determination that carried pioneers across the plains and built great cities from frontier outposts remains. The Show Me State nickname, whether originated from congressional skepticism or mining town vigilance, captures something essential about Missouri character. Missourians demand proof, distrust fancy talk, and value practical results. This pragmatism, sometimes frustrating, often serves Missouri well. In an era of fake news and political spin, Missouri skepticism seems prescient. Missouri's future depends on bridging its divisions, urban and rural, black and white, rich and poor. The state's history shows both the dangers of division and the possibilities of unity. When Missourians work together, building the Eads Bridge, hosting the World's Fair, responding to floods, they achieve remarkable things. As we conclude this journey through Missouri history, remember that history isn't just past events, but living legacy. The decisions of previous generations shape current reality. The French fur traders' river routes became modern highways. The German immigrants' brewing traditions still flavor St. Louis culture. The jazz musicians' innovations still echo in Kansas City clubs. Missouri's history continues being written. Every Missourian contributes to this ongoing story. The state that stood at the center of American expansion, that helped define American culture, that produced leaders who shaped American destiny, continues influencing America's future. From the mighty rivers that define its borders to the vibrant cities and resilient small towns that dot its landscape, Missouri remains what it has always been, a state that shows America itself. Thank you for joining this exploration of Missouri history, from ancient Cahokia to contemporary challenges, from French explorers to future innovators. Missouri's story reminds us that history isn't just about the past, it's about understanding how we got here and where we might go next. The Show Me State has shown us much over the centuries, and its story is far from over.